Let's move over to our wide receiver starts of the week. Number of guys here that are on the bubble, some deeper names, whether you're in a 12-team league, a 10-team league, or a 14-team league. We'll try to hit on all these different guys. And I've seen the memes on DJ Moore. Like I want to hate something as much as Teddy Bridgewater hates throwing to DJ Moore. I feel like his redraft value has just absolutely plummeted. He was a guy that a lot of people were high on, us included. Before the season, had him as like a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2, but only 2 receptions over the last 2 games. We're seeing the rise of Curtis Samuel essentially out of nowhere with 3 back-to-back great fantasy outings from Samuel. And Moore's role has changed to kind of like a just go route, post route, field stretcher, like Robby Anderson used to be on the Jets before he joined the Panthers. So he's like a low-volume, high-yardage, boom-bust guy. I think you have to move the expectations down with him from a wide receiver 1 to a flex. And he's on a down stretch, but he's still seeing a ton of air yards. He's 13th in targets, 8th in air yards. We've seen Teddy be fantastic. He's 5th in the NFL in passing yards. And in this Chiefs matchup in Week 9, Teddy threw the ball to running back 16 different times. I don't expect that to continue every single week. There were 13 targets to Robby Anderson. So with the 16 of the running backs, 13 to Robby, there just wasn't enough to go around. The Tampa Bay matchup in Week 10 should be a good one. The last time they played, DJ had 20 fantasy points with 8 receptions for 120 yards. I'm willing to start him, but I know the floor is a lot lower than I want it to be. I'd rather take a guy with a more defined role if I can, but if you have to start DJ Moore, if you don't have any other wide receiver options, you can plug him in as a flex and hope for the best.
Yeah, I'm fine to flex him. I think he's still an every week flex start for me. You got to take the ups with the downs. I mean, if you look at the full season, he's still wide receiver 21, so he's still in that range. I mean, putting up 13 fantasy points a game. He's right in that range of guys like, you look at Brandon Cooks, T. Higgins, Devontae Parker. So he's still startable for me. He's still playing more snaps than any other Carolina receiver. You're right, though. Teddy just hasn't been looking his way. And it really feels like DJ Moore and Robby Anderson did flip roles for what we expected. We expected DJ to be this heavily targeted, heavily involved, all 3 levels of the field guy like Robby has been, and we expected Robby to be kind of the deep threat like DJ Moore has been. So you got to temper expectations, and I know he's disappointed because where you drafted him was not to be wide receiver 21 through 9 weeks of the season. But I think he's still a start because we've seen it. He's gotten loose deep several times. There's a lot of weapons to guard in this Carolina offense. So he's always got that potential to pop for the big play, and we've seen several big games from DJ Moore this season. As a flex, I think you still roll him out there with some confidence, even in a relatively tough matchup against Tampa Bay.
Next up, Jalen Reagor in a matchup against the New York Giants. How are you feeling about him? To me, he's a desperation dice roll start this week in Week 10.
Yeah, he should be on rosters, but I'm not trying to start him. I mean, this is similar to anybody coming off an injury that's kind of like a fringe player. It's similar to guys changing teams. It's similar to what we said about Antonio Brown lately. It's like this guy's a rookie. He's coming off another injury. They're coming off the bye week. He's been, in and out of the lineup all season long. I think you still have to wait and see with Reagor and see if he can get hot. I know he's had a couple of really nice plays this season, but you look at this Eagles offense, even in a good matchup, and they've got Fulgham, who's taken over as the 1. Shout out to you, Stef, yet again for being all in on Fulgham from the first week of his breakout. Dallas Goedert is back in the lineup. Alshon Jeffrey could play this week. Miles Sanders is going to be back. So Reagor could get loose deep. He could see, 5, 6 targets in this game. Maybe Wentz even locks in on him and he gets more than that. But I'm just not counting on him. I think he's, again, you said it best, a desperation, flex play this week. But again, he shouldn't be on waiver wires. I think you should stash him on your bench and see what you have here with Jalen Reagor as he continues to get kind of the rust off in this offense. We've seen him try to shake the rust off a couple different times this year, and then he goes back out due to injury or whatever else. So I think you got to pick him up and see what you got. But again, you got to be bold to throw him out there this week.
Yeah, at this point, Reagor kind of has that Deshaun Jackson role, but he's less proven, right? So we know that the upside is there on this offense. It's just one that, you look at the game script of what's probably going to happen against the Giants. They're probably not going to be in comeback mode, needing to air it out, in which case I don't want to start Reagor. I'd rather see what he can do in this matchup before I start plugging him in. And Travis Fulgham is just taking over this offense really as a whole. He has 26% target share since he's taken over as the starter, which is top 10 in the league. Reagor has seen a 13% target share in the 3 games he's played this season. So the target volume just isn't there yet. If the volume goes up, we know Reagor can be a splash play guy. So definitely one to keep an eye on. Keep him stashed, but don't plug him in this week. But a guy you probably do want to plug in this week, a guy who's been absolutely exploding lately. He's on a tear right now, Christian Kirk. And at this point, you have to look at him as a startable low-end wide receiver 2 or flex play. And his issue for most of the year has been volume and injuries. It has not been efficiency. 20-plus fantasy points over the last 3 weeks, all in good matchups. He had 5 touchdowns in that span. And the Bills should be another good matchup with DeAndre Hopkins there drawing the attention away with the secondary. Kirk has been capable of big plays. We saw a 56-yard touchdown against Miami last week. It's a beautiful ball from Kyler, looking like Russell Wilson out there. I think you got to ride the wave with Christian Kirk, plug him right back in, expect 15-plus in this game.
It doesn't necessarily feel great, and it feels like any given week he's going to bust her out. But one of our themes this year, Steph, I feel like has just been you got to ride the wave. Whether it was Chase Claypool after the big game, or some of these other guys, you just have to ride the hot hand and see what you got. And with Christian Kirk, you said it, 3 straight 20-plus point games. Even the couple games before that, he was double digits. So he's had a decent floor this year with Kyler Murray just absolutely balling out in this up-tempo offense. So with Christian Kirk, you got to keep riding the wave. Throw him in there, see what he can do until he proves you otherwise. That's kind of what you got to do in fantasy football. Don't overthink it. Just play the hot hand. And yes, there's a chance that Christian Kirk could come out and give you a 5-point game or something like that. But to me, it's like until he shows me that I shouldn't be starting him, there's no reason for me to overthink it. He's seeing a decent amount of snaps. Still seeing less snaps, ironically, than Larry Fitzgerald in this offense. But he's on the field a ton, and he's getting utilized on these jet sweeps and other things as well with his speed. So Christian Kirk is a start for me this week in your flex.
Yeah, unless you're like a degenerate gambler, I think you got to put Christian Kirk in just based on what we've seen. Right,
yeah.
We can.
And like you said, the matchup is good too. The matchup helps as well.
It should be high scoring. They should be able to move the ball, and all we can operate off of is the data that we have. And so far, Christian Kirk has been extremely productive. Let's talk about another guy who's been relatively productive over the last couple of weeks since returning from an injury, and that's Sterling Shepard. And I know, Alex, you were all over Golden Tate in draft season as a really, really late name that you could take in the back end of the double-digit rounds.
Dang, we had to bring that up, huh?
Hey, you loved him because he was a high-floor flex play, but that's kind of what we've seen Sterling Shepard turn into. And I said it all offseason, when Shepard is healthy, he is the no-question number 1 for the New York Giants. It's not Darius Slayton, and we've seen Golden Tate now in the doghouse. He was a healthy scratch, suspended by the team for the Week 9 outing. And because of that, Sterling Shepard's seen 8 or more targets since he's come back from injury. He's not getting deep downfield targets like a Golden Tate might have, but he does have that in his wheelhouse. You're never going to expect like a 2-touchdown explosion game from Sterling Shepard, especially not against Philadelphia in Week 10. But I think Shep is safe for 7-plus targets, 50-plus yards. The Eagles are good against the run, and they're about dead even against the pass. Hopefully Darius Slay plays coverage on Darius Slayton, so we can see that Darius matchup there. But even if that is the case where Darius Slay does play up on Shepard, Shepard's been moving all around the formation. Has played 30% of his snaps from the slot. So I think New York's going to find a way to get him the ball. Really, you just hope that Danny Dimes can come in and execute and keep that floor as high as we've seen it be.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Sterling Shepard. Danny Dimes hasn't been, that breakout season that a lot of people, myself included, thought he was going to have. But he's done enough to support some of these weapons. We've seen a couple of big games from Slayton, and Shepard, since he's come back from that injury, has been fantastic. It's been 3 weeks, and he's had an average of 15 fantasy points a game in the last 3 weeks. He's wide receiver 16. So, again, with Shepard, it's a lot different than a guy like Christian Kirk. He's actually giving you a really high floor, and you said it. Whenever Sterling Shepard is healthy, he is the number 1 for this team, and that has not changed. So if you have Sterling Shepard, it's a different situation. You got to look at your opponent, look at what you really need, but I'm fine starting him. If you need a high, consistent floor and you just need a solid 10, 12 points out of somebody, Shepard's your guy. If you're going against like the juggernaut in your league and you want that upside, I think you might turn to somebody like a Christian Kirk, for example. So I like Sterling Shepard, and I think he's very, very startable this week.
He's just a floor guy. Not a sexy upside name, but he's going to be able to get it
Yep.
done. But let's talk about a guy that's really been underperforming since his bye week in week 7, the last 2 weeks against Green Bay and Detroit. It is Justin Jefferson. Has seen season lows in his snap share the last 2 weeks. I think that's more of a function of Dalvin Cook running all over the Packers and the Lions. But for Justin Jefferson in a Week 10 matchup against Chicago, are you willing to roll him out there? I'm kind of tentative with the Chicago matchup being what it is.
Oh, man, this is tough. I think I'm trying to avoid, but I'm willing to. Like, I would take both Sterling Shepard and Christian Kirk, who we just talked about this week, over Justin Jefferson. But I'm still willing to roll him out there. I mean, I'm someone who has Adam Thielen in multiple leagues, and the last 2 weeks have been disappointing for anyone catching passes on the Vikings, unless your name's Irv Smith Jr. getting these dump downs on the 1 yard line. So the passing volume just hasn't been there because we've seen Dalvin Cook absolutely explode against these weak rushing defenses, and the passing game hasn't had to do anything. They're in positive game scripts. Kirk Cousins doesn't need to throw the ball. And if they can take the ball out of Kirk Cousins' hands and put it in Dalvin Cook's hands, they're going to do it 9 times out of 10. So, I think the Bears matchup is actually good in some ways for both Thielen and Jefferson because it should slow down this Minnesota running game. But having said that, like they're also very stingy against the pass. So maybe it's more of a balanced game from the Minnesota Vikings. We just don't see the overall efficiency and production. But I think Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen should see more volume this week. I just don't know that the production is going to be there. So kind of to circle back, I'm willing to start Jefferson, but I would avoid if you have other options.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am willing to start him in rosters where I need to. Last one here. Another rookie wide receiver coming off a pretty nice boom game against Atlanta. 24.5 fantasy points, 14 targets, 7 receptions, 125 yards, and a touchdown. It's Jerry Jeudy. Potentially, we just saw his breakout game. He has a matchup now against Las Vegas. Are you willing to go chase those points with Jerry Jeudy?
I am. Jerry Jeudy was the guy in this game. I mean, not only did he put up the production, but he was getting the snaps and the targets as well. I mean, he saw 84% of snaps in this game, and Drew Lock was clearly focused on him as his number one receiver. I know in the past few weeks we've seen Noah Fant get a lot of attention, and we've seen Tim Patrick even be much more involved than we thought. It took Jerry Jeudy quite a while to ramp up, but 14 targets in this game against the Atlanta Falcons is ridiculous. I know the Falcons' defense is a little bit weak, but the Raiders have been giving up points as well, and they've been putting up points of their own. So I expect this game to be a higher scoring game. I need to check the line here really quick to see what Vegas is expecting. But I'm willing to roll out Jerry Jeudy. I think, the targets are going to continue to be there. And in a game that should be higher volume and higher scoring, I think he could put up numbers. It's a 51-point over-under. So Vegas is expecting a decent point total as well. So I'll play Jerry Jeudy. I'll play him over Justin Jefferson, another rookie we just talked about this week.
He's also coming off a 10-target game against the Chargers. So since Drew Lock has been back at QB for the Broncos, Jeudy has been benefiting from that. I think the rapport is building. And look, for Jeudy, he was actually really inefficient. Only caught 50% of the passes thrown his way. But if you're getting double-digit targets, you don't have to be that efficient to be able to produce. You add in a touchdown here or there, you're going to feel pretty good with that. Seems like that with the running game kind of slowing down between Gordon and Lindsey, they really have needed to pass the ball a little bit more. And I think they're able to move the ball a little bit better that way. And Drew Lock's kind of showed out. So I think Jeudy is a guy that you can fire up in your flex spot.